Days after a suicide bomber killed 40 CRPF Jawans in Pulwama, for which the JEM took responsibility, the Indian Air Force has carried out with what it calls non-military preemptive strikes on terror camps across the line of control. Now, India's Foreign Secretary has said that the biggest Jaish-e-Mohammed training camp in Balakot has been hit and a large number of terrorists have been eliminated. It is important to note that the Indian government has not put out a casualty number. They merely say large numbers have been eliminated. He also said that the airstrikes were absolutely necessary and added that the Jaish-e-Mohammed was preparing for more terror attacks and hence this preemptive action in self-defense by India. In response, Pakistan's foreign minister has termed the airstrikes, and I quote, as a grave aggression and said that there will be a befitting reply. In a statement after a security meeting chaired by Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan, Pakistan said it will respond at a time and place of its choosing. However, Pakistan has denied India's claim of targeting a terror camp in Balakot, resulting in heavy casualties, calling it, and I quote again, reckless and fictitious claims. Now, before we bring you a sequence of how the events unfolded, and of course, this is as per government information, here is India's Foreign Secretary Vijay Gokhale and Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi on the airstrikes carried out today.
In an intelligence-led operation in the early hours of today, India struck the biggest training camp of the Jaish-e-Mohammed in Balakot. In this operation, a very large number of Jaish-e-Mohammed terrorists, trainers, senior commanders, and groups of jihadis who were being trained for Fidaiin action were eliminated.
Fourth, concluded that India has committed uncalled for aggression, to which Pakistan shall respond at the time and place of its choosing.
Well, reactions there coming in from Pakistan and the Foreign Secretary detailing India's airstrike carried out today. Now, let's talk about the events and how they unfolded since the wee hours of the morning. Now, this is according to government sources. Remember, the Indian government has officially not put out a sequence of events. So, according to government sources, 12 Mirage fighter jets left the Gwalior base with laser-guided bombs. That took place at about 3:30 this morning. At around 3:45 a.m., the Indian Air Force struck the Jaish-e-Mohammed's terror camp in Balakot. The camp is located on a hillock, allegedly led by Yusuf Azhar, the brother-in-law of Masood Azhar. Yusuf Azhar was one of the terrorists who hijacked an Indian Airlines flight in 1999 and negotiated the release of his brother-in-law, Masood Azhar. Remember, the Indian government in its official statement has not said anything about whether Yusuf Azhar was terminated in that airstrike or not. Minutes later, at 3:48 a.m., the Air Force has hit a second terror camp in Muzaffarabad, and the attack lasted for about 10 minutes. Then, we are told, there was an attack on a third terror camp located at Chakoti at 3:58, and this lasted till 4:04 a.m. An hour after this, Pakistan's defense spokesperson took to Twitter, confirmed the attacks but denied that there was any damage or any casualties, something that Pakistan maintains even in its statement. A few hours later, we saw the statement coming in from India's Foreign Secretary at 11:30 this morning, confirming the air operation by India. Now, this airstrike has huge implications. This is the first time that the Indian Air Force has crossed the line of control which was established after the 1971 war with Pakistan. And this is a significant policy shift for the Indian government. Prime Minister Modi met with members of the Cabinet Committee on Security after the pre-dawn airstrikes on terror camps across the LOC. Speaking at a rally in Rajasthan, the Prime Minister did not directly refer to the airstrikes, but he did say that our nation is in safe hands. Other opposition leaders have said that they stand by the government and the armed forces. In fact, the Minister for External Affairs, Sushma Swaraj, said that after her meeting with all parties, saying that the opposition stands united behind the government. Take a look.
आओ हम सब भारत के पराक्रमी वीरों को नमन करें, सर झुका करके नमन करें। आज चूरू की धरती से मैं देशवासियों को विश्वास दिलाता हूं कि देश सुरक्षित हाथों में है।
मनेश्वर बसुमतारी जो पुलवामा हमले में शहीद हुए, उनकी भी हम यहां याद करते हैं। और एयरफोर्स के हमारे जो पायलट हैं, उनको हम बधाई देते हैं।
I feel proud about Indian Air Force, where they have taken action and they have shown to the neighboring country that India is the last country which will create any problem for anybody. But anybody is going to create problem for India. India is also a country which will not keep mum.
I salute the Indian Air Force for having taken action to protect our country.
जवानों ने पाकिस्तान के अंदर घुस के जैश के ठिकानों के ऊपर अटैक किया है और उनके लोगों को, जैश के लोगों को हताहत किया है। इसका ये बहुत ही जांबाज काम उन लोगों ने किया है और पूरा देश इसके ऊपर गर्व महसूस कर रहा है और मैं हमारी इंडियन एयरफोर्स को, जवानों को, सेना को इसके लिए बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूँ।
We stand with the government on this issue, and secondly, Article 51 of UN Charter gives us the right to act in self-defense. And the modern interpretation of Article 51 is that if a country is not able to stop non-state actors, then another country which is a victim of terrorist violence has the right to act in self-defense, which India has done. This is my interpretation.
The opposition coming out in support of the action today. In fact, External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj briefed those who were present in that all-party meeting. Parikshit Luthra is standing by now with the details. Parikshit, there was an all-party meeting. Sushma Swaraj explaining the rationale behind this preemptive strike to opposition leaders, also reaching out to foreign envoys, explaining India's position on why this was an appropriate and necessary measure. Take us through all the details.
Well, that all-party meeting was extremely significant. Sushma Swaraj, Arun Jaitley, Rajnath Singh briefed the leaders of the opposition. Foreign Secretary Vijay Gokhale was also there. Sources telling us that Sushma Swaraj twice emphasized that this was an anti-terror strike and not a military operation that took place. She also told party leaders that they had taken the US into confidence post this airstrike, and Sushma Swaraj had spoken to the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo as well. She called this a successful operation. She said that India had credible intelligence information that a large number of operators, terror operators belonging to the JEM were hiding in this terror camp, and the Air Force had been successful in eliminating them. All the parties unanimously said that they support the Indian Air Force and the government on this operation. Members like Sitaram Yechury asked the government not to muddy the waters, not to raise issues like Article 370 and 35A right now, focus on peace and calm. Naresh Gujral, for one, raised the issue of security of border states and warned them that while security in J&K is heightened right now, other border states could be targeted. The meeting of the Foreign Secretary with different envoys was very important as well. Here too, the Foreign Secretary emphasized that there is no escalation that the Indian government is planning at this stage, and this was a preemptive non-military strike. The target was carefully chosen in order to avoid civilian casualties. This was not a strike against the Pakistani military or the civilians. It was only against the Jaish-e-Mohammed. So a very important word going up from the Foreign Secretary. Let's see what happens in Pakistan now and how Pakistan reacts in the days to come. Back to you.
पाकिस्तान में स्थित आतंकवादी संगठन जैश-ए-मोहम्मद के बड़े आतंकी कैंप पर भारतीय वायुसेना द्वारा किए गए ऑपरेशन के बारे में अधिकृत जानकारी देने के लिए मैंने सर्वदलीय बैठक बुलाई थी। बैठक में सरकार की तरफ से गृह मंत्री श्री राजनाथ सिंह जी, वित्त मंत्री श्री अरुण जेटली जी, संसदीय कार्य राज्य मंत्री श्री विजय गोयल जी तथा लगभग सभी बड़े दलों के प्रतिनिधि उपस्थित थे। मुझे खुशी है कि सभी प्रतिनिधियों ने एक स्वर में पहले भारतीय वायुसेना को बधाई दी, फिर सरकार द्वारा किए गए किसी भी आतंक विरोधी कार्रवाई के लिए हमेशा समर्थन देने का आश्वासन दिलाया।
Minister of External Affairs Sushma Swaraj there. So how is Pakistan likely to respond and how should India prepare itself? Here's the retired Chief of the Armed Forces, Army Chief General V.P. Malik, who led India during the Kargil War, and retired Lieutenant General D.S. Huda, the architect of the surgical strikes, with their take.
I myself don't expect Pakistan will give up its policy of terrorism with one strike or two strike that we do. And we must not forget that today we have Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jamaat or JEM, but these are all replaceable people. You know, these are, as they call it, these are their strategic assets. The numbers can be increased, the leadership can also be trained. So we have to be prepared to take them on if the newcomers join these outfits or some new outfits are created. And we have to be prepared for a long fight.
The Pakistani Prime Minister will have to think very tough, very hard. What is it that he now needs to do? He had made statements that, we will retaliate. He said that very specifically a few days ago. But they also realize, I think, that they are internationally isolated. Given our conventional superiority over them, any escalation is only going to hurt Pakistan more than it hurts us.
Well, Lieutenant General Huda, the man behind the surgical strikes, as well as the former army chief there, on the possible Pakistan response. And how can India ramp up diplomatic pressure on Pakistan? Can India isolate Pakistan globally? Here are two former diplomats on the potential steps that India can take to increase the pressure on Pakistan.
This is a major shift in our policy, which tells Pakistan that we'll reach out to the terrorists wherever they are, not only in POK, but this was on Pakistan's territory in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. But as I said, this strike or any other thing, there is no silver bullet that would give us the results that we want. It has to be a combination of various factors, and there you have to get the support of the international community. Financial Action Task Force was mentioned here earlier. Pakistan is arraigned before them. Can we persuade influential countries there to blacklist them, which would make it difficult for them to access international financing? They are approaching the IMF for a bailout, which is also very essential for them to access international financing. Can we persuade the Americans and others to make sure that they do not get it till they mend their behavior, and exert that sort of pressure also on Pakistan? Now there, the task is not going to be that easy. We have been talking of isolating Pakistan, and I think I mentioned on one of your shows on this very channel that isolating Pakistan is not as easy as we sometimes believe it to be.
We are just about to enter into a very subtle, critical phase in India, because the Lok Sabha elections will be just about 2 months away, and you'll have a code of conduct, etc. So basically the government will have other priorities. But the best advice to the government will be, please don't chest thump, don't use this domestically beyond a point, because then you may just have some irrational reaction. And wars start when countries do not necessarily, or leaderships do not necessarily behave on rational basis, or they misassess the other country's intentions or other country's capabilities. So it would be a time to really, if Pakistan backs off, not really rub their nose in the ground beyond a point, but remain alert.
Well, diplomats there on what India needs to do to step up the diplomatic offensive to isolate Pakistan. Of course, easier said than done. Now, there are reports of heavy shelling across the line of control. The Indian Army is retaliated after Pakistan targeted 55 posts along the border. Mufti Islah joins us now with more details. Mufti, ceasefire violations being reported along various sectors, including Rajouri, Akhnur, Nowshera. Can you tell us, A, what is happening at this point in time along the LOC, and also within the valley, heightened security measures now in light of what has transpired this morning?
Well, yes, the LOC is really heated up after, the strikes which India conducted today. What follows is that through the afternoon and in the evening also, this time around also, there's massive firing and shelling going on from the both sides. And in fact, Indian side is also retaliating. Now, these areas are Nowshera, Babakori, Kalal, Pokhara, which are in Nowshera. Most of the firing is really taking place in Poonch, like Menda sector also. It's happening. We believe that few people have got injured, although we're still waiting for confirmation. But when you're talking about inside Valley, yes, heightened tension out there. There's massive deployment which the center had sent to the valley 3 or 4 days back, 12,000 additional troops sent in. And through the day, they were patrolling in Srinagar, most of the vulnerable areas where you have, stone pelting incidents taking place. Inside Srinagar, we saw Hurriyat leaders really, their houses being cordoned, and NI also, along with Jammu and Kashmir police, raiding some of the separatist leaders' houses. Clearly, at one place in Mysuma, which also happens to be headquarters of Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front, there clashes occurred between police and protesters. Police had to really lob tear gas shells, but no harm, no injuries happened. But all in all, there's certainly heightened tension across Jammu and Kashmir because of these strikes, with people perhaps anticipating, especially on the borders, that if Pakistan retaliates, then these villagers really will get displaced.
Mufti Islah, appreciate you joining us with the latest. So firing and shelling being reported along the LOC and ceasefire violations by Pakistan and the Indian armed forces also retaliating. Story: US President Donald Trump and North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un are in the capital of Vietnam. This is the second summit between both leaders after the first one took place 8 months ago in Singapore. CBC's Iman Havez reports from Hanoi on what we can expect when both leaders sit down face to face. Iman.
Kim Jong-un arrived here after a more than 48-hour train ride from North Korea. He arrived here in the Vietnamese capital just a few hours ago. We saw his motorcade winding its way through the Hanoi streets. We're expecting President Trump, all of which begs the question, just what should we expect from this summit meeting between the two world leaders? A couple of things right off the get-go for this relatively hastily scheduled summit meeting between the two leaders. One is the issue of verification. The United States side is going to push for some verification that the North Koreans have taken steps that were discussed in the Singapore summit between the two countries last year, and will look for proof that those steps have actually occurred. Also on sanctions, the North Koreans are expected really to start pushing now for economic relief from the United States in exchange for further denuclearization steps. And then finally, officials who briefed us in Washington last week said that both sides have not even agreed on a definition for the term denuclearization. Ultimately, the two sides are going to have to put on paper just what that term actually means in practical reality, in terms of the technology and the facilities that the North Koreans are operating throughout their country. So a lot here on the table. They are effectively at square one, despite the fact that they had that summit meeting between Trump and Kim last year.
Well, President Trump and the North Korean leader, their second meeting, but of course, outcome is still expected. But before we let you go here on What's Hot, important news coming in, and this was along expected lines as far as the prompt corrective action is concerned. More banks exiting the PCA framework. The Reserve Bank of India has taken 3 banks out of the prompt corrective action framework. 2 PSU banks, Allahabad Bank and Corporation Bank, will not face stringent rules anymore thanks to the government's recent capital infusion, and 1 private bank, that's Dhanalakshmi Bank, has also exited the PCA framework. The Reserve Bank will continue to keep an eye on the performance metrics of these banks. As things stand, 6 more banks remain under the PCA framework. So 3 more out of PCA, Allahabad, Corporation and Dhanalakshmi. We'll take a break. Don't go anywhere. Markets today reacting to the developments that were on the geopolitical side, the tensions between India and Pakistan taking a toll on the markets, but finally coming off their intraday lows. We discuss that and more on Markets Today when we return, and we'll see you again on India Business Hour.